Good evening, everyone. We are on page 246, towards the end of Siman Tezvav in Iggeres HaKodesh. It's been a long letter. Hashem, tonight we will complete it. Page 246. And in this letter, as mentioned, it's not a letter, but in this Siman, in this chapter, the Alter Rebbe talks about the Midas. And first we spoke about the Midas of the Nefesh HaBahamis, and then we spoke about the Seichel, the Chabad of the Nefesh HaBahamis, which is the source of the Midas. And then we moved on and we spoke about the last 2 weeks or 3 weeks, we spoke about the Midas of the Nefesh Olikis. And now we started talking about this a little already last week, the Chabad, the Seichel of the Nefesh Olikis, but we will start over that sugya, and that's what we are going to conclude with, is an analysis of the Chabad, the Chachma Bina Das of the Nefesh Olikis, with the understanding that ultimately this is all just to give us a little taste and understanding of what the Midas and the spheres are above by Hashem. 4 lines from the bottom of page 246. What is the source of all of these Midas? Hein mechabad. All the Midas, they come from Chabad, from the Chachma Bina Das. The Hainu, what is that? HaChachma, Himakar HaSeichel. Hamasig is Hashem. Chachma is the source of the Seichel. Chachma is actually not Seichel itself, as we've discussed on many occasions. Chachma is the source of Seichel. It is the source of the Seichel that understands Hashem. The Chachmasei, Udulasei, Umideisei, Vakdeshes. It is the source of the understanding of Hashem and Hashem's greatness, Hashem's attributes, His holy attributes. Through which Hashem gives life to and orchestrates and controls all the worlds, the higher worlds and the lower worlds. So the Chachma is the information, the revelation, that will become the awareness of the greatness of Hashem. Bina, he is Blindness. Bina is the processing of this understanding. So Chachma is, as we discussed many times, is compared to Re'iyah, compared to seeing. It's when something is revealed to us. It's an awareness, and Bina is when we begin to process that awareness. So Chachma is the awareness of Hashem's greatness. Bina is when we begin to think about it. And this is with length, with breadth, and with width, or length and width and breadth. And what is that? What are these 3 aspects of Bina? Bina is 3-dimensional, because every idea is really 3-dimensional. So the first thing you have is Oirech, which is the length. The length of an idea is bringing an idea down. That's the idea of length, which is taking an idea, and an idea which is abstract, an idea which is lofty, and bringing it down and making it relevant, making it practical, making it simpler. That's the idea of the length of an idea. Veroichev, the width of an idea is horizontal, is lateral. That is the idea, I have a certain idea, and then when I think into it, we have the Maven Davar, Metoich Davar, the idea of developing other ideas based on that. That's the width of an idea. Every idea has numerous applications, not only bringing it down, that's the Eirech. That's the length. Length is when you bring it down. But when you expand the idea and find other applications, that is the width of the idea. And then you have the Reichev. The Reichev is...
You just said...
then you have the Oimek.
Depth.
The Oimek is the depth. And that's the other... The Oimek in a way is the opposite of Eirech. Oimek is digging deeper and deeper into the idea and coming up with even deeper ideas based on that idea. And this all is a function of Bina. Bina is taking an idea and unfolding it and processing it, and as they say in Yiddish, entwickeling, developing it in all directions. Again, the idea of Bina is to infer one idea from another idea, and to give birth from this understanding its children. What are the children of Seichel? What is the children of Bina? Shehin midas ahava v'yira. Those are the midas of ahava v'yira. V'shari midas, and the other midas hanelades benefesh olikis. which are born within the nefesh alikis, the different feelings that are born within the neshama. Hamaskelas u'misbeinenes b'gdulos Hashem, the nefesh alikis, which contemplates and understands the greatness of Hashem, kiludolose ein cheker, Hashem's greatness, which has no end. There's no limit to it. Now, when a person uses their chachma and bina to think into the greatness of Hashem, what kind of midah will be born? So the Rebbe says, "Yes, bechinas gedulas Hashem." Sometimes you think into the greatness of Hashem. And when the nefesh alikis contemplates the greatness of Hashem, tipel eleha imasa v'fachad. It will be overcome with fright, awe and fright. Shehi yira tata, which is the lower level of yira. Shehi bechinas malchus. The lower level of yira in general is associated with malchus, with action. V'yesh bechinas gedulas Hashem, and sometimes you think it's the greatness of Hashem. Shemimena ba, what are you going to get from that yira ilah? A much higher level of yira, which is called yira boishas. A yira, a awe, which is associated with boishas, with insignificance and shame. V'yesh, sometimes that you think into the greatness of Hashem. Yesh bechinas mimena ba avarabba. Suddenly you come to a tremendous love of Hashem. V'yesh bechina, another time, another aspect of contemplation, shemimena ba avazuta, from which you get a lower level of love. V'chein b'midas achitzonius shein chesed chulu. And the same thing is when it comes to the external midas, which are chesed and gevura. Remember, we spoke about the midas pnimius are avanira, the chitzonius are chesed and gevura. So what the Rebbe is saying over here is that what's interesting is that sometimes you have two people contemplating the greatness of Hashem. One, it'll cause that person to have a yira ilah. One little person will have a yira tata. Another person will have the exact opposite reaction. Another person will have an ava from it. And it really depends, as we'll see soon, on the das. And we're gonna get into das in a moment. But depending on which aspect you connect with, because both are true when you think about the greatness of Hashem. So what is the result? One possible result is you think of the greatness of Hashem, so from that you develop a tremendous awe and reverence and fear of Hashem. Or on the other hand, you could think into the greatness of Hashem and the lowliness and meaninglessness of this world and of ourselves, and that awakens within a person a tremendous desire to connect to Hashem, to the greatness of Hashem, which is Ava. So the Chachma and Bina can lead to a different midas depending on how the Blindness is channeled, and to which midah is channeled. And the Rebbe over here, he talks about, he reminds us of different madrigas of Yira, which he spoke about in Mekuti Amarim, in Perik Mem Gimel and Perik Mem Daled. The Alter Rebbe talks, in general, there are two different levels of Yira. There's Yira Tata, and there's Yira Ilah. Yira Tata is a lower level of Yira, and Yira Ilah is a higher level of Yira, which Alter Rebbe also calls over here Yiras Boishas, a fear which is connected somewhat to shame, although today shame has a very negative connotation. We'll explain it a little more in a moment. Sometimes also this higher level of Yira is called Yiras Haremimus, which means the awe when contemplating Hashem's greatness. What is the difference between these two levels of Yira? It's not just how much do I fear, is it a more or less? There's a qualitative difference between the two. There's the difference between, imagine you're driving and suddenly you see the lights behind you and you hear the sirens, the police car stops you. Police car comes over to you. So if you're like most people, you're feeling Yira. There's a fear. There's a fear of a policeman, okay? The fear of the policeman today isn't the same as it was 30 years ago. But at the end of the day, there still remains that Yira. How is that different than the Yira that a person feels when they're in the presence of a great tzaddik? Which is also, there's a tremendous feeling of Yira. What's the difference between the two of them? And the answer is, the fear that you have of the policeman, do you really fear the policeman? Is the policeman a scary person?
No.
No. What do you fear?
You lose your life. It might shoot you.
Okay. You fear the power that he wields.
Yeah.
The gun.
You fear the gun. It's not only the gun. It's the...
He can arrest you.
He can arrest you. It's the department and the power that he represents. The policeman himself, he could be a lowly nothing. So it's not him that you fear, it's his power that you fear. Even, for example, forget about a policeman for a second. The fear that you have, and again, when we were talking about yira in Hebrew and using the word fear, the word fear isn't always the most accurate word. Fear usually implies, the fear of an imminent threat, and we're not talking about that. But the awe and yira and reverence that a person feels when they see it, when they're in front of a king. Okay, so let's say you got to meet a king. So it's a real yira. Again, not a fear, but it's a real awe and a real reverence. But is it a yira? Is the awe and reverence of the king himself? Does the king himself inspire the awe and the reverence?
What he represents.
It's his position and his power,
Power.
right? If this king was stripped of his position and his power, it's nothing. It's not that the king himself is such an amazing person. Not that the king himself is so awe-inspiring. It's the position and the power that he has, and the more power he has, the bigger the king he is, the greater the awe when you face that person. But when you're standing in front of a great tzaddik, and for me the frame of reference is very easy. I just think back to the times when I stood in front of the Rebbe, whether it was by a Fabringen, whether going back by the Rebbe by dollars, and I have to tell you that the yira was tremendous. Tremendous yira, tremendous bittul. Literally, the shaking in the boots kind of yira when you pass by the Rebbe to get $1. It wasn't something that I did very often. The Rebbe gave $1 every Sunday. The Rebbe gave $1 very often after Mincha or Ma'ariv, and anyone was able to go by. Most of them didn't do it very often. I mean, there was a practical idea, which is, if all the Siddim went all the time, that means the Rebbe would have been standing on his feet, every time for hours and hours and hours. Siddim have Rachmanis on the Rebbe also to a certain extent. But there was also another idea, which is simply that it was difficult. It was emotionally wrenching walking by the Rebbe. And that feeling of the Yiras Harim was that one felt. Now, what are you scared of? What power does the Rebbe have? The Rebbe has a police force.
No.
What the Vad HaMesader over there, what are they going to do to you exactly? Okay, and what's the Rebbe, in today's parsha, what is the Rebbe going to do? They're going to pull out his stick like Aaron did and start giving me makas like Dam Tzfardei Akin Mara? Is that what we're scared of? So what is it? What is the Yira? This is a emes Yira Salem. The Alter Rebbe actually, in his Siddur, Matikun Chatzos, the Alter Rebbe writes a whole long piece over there explaining this idea. When standing in front of someone, a big tzaddik, a big chacham, that's what the Alter Rebbe says. That Yira that you feel, that awe, that reverence you feel, that's what we call Yiras Boishas. What do you mean Boishas? It's almost like you're ashamed to exist. You feel so nothing in the tzaddik's presence, and that's a cause of such a tremendous yira, such a tremendous awe, and that's the higher level of yira. That's yiras haremus. That's what we call yira ilah, the highest level of yira of Hashem. You're not scared of Hashem, and it's not like you say to yourself, "Wow, look Hashem! He created the world, He created the heavens, and He created the earth, and He created the Grand Canyon, and look at those oceans and how mighty and powerful." At the end of the day, when your fear is from Hashem because of His power, look, He created heaven and earth, and He created Gan Eden and Gehenna and the Grand Canyon. Ultimately, this is like fearing a policeman. Obviously, a million times greater than that, but just like the policeman you fear because of his power, if you're fearing Hashem because of what He has done, because of His creations, so that's a lower level of yira. The higher level of yira is a yira ilah. Again, this yira saremus, which is a yira, which is simply when you're in the presence of Hashem, in the greatness of Hashem, and you understand and contemplate Hashem's greatness. And Hashem's greatness, how it even transcends all the worlds. In other words, the whole creation of all the worlds is nothing to Hashem. It's not even an item on Hashem's resume. It's in the words of the Alter Rebbe and a Maimer, which we've mentioned in the past. That's not the Iker Elokus that He creates. That worlds are created from Him. Hashem is Atu Achli Nivreelam, Atum Shnivreelam, the same Hashem before the world was created, after the world was created. That's a higher level of Yira. So sometimes the Alter Rebbe says, you contemplate the greatness of Hashem and you come to a Yira law. Sometimes you contemplate the greatness of Hashem and you arrive at a Yira Tata. Sometimes the Alter Rebbe says you contemplate the greatness of Hashem and you come to a Ava Rabba, a tremendous love for Hashem. Sometimes Ava Zuta, a lesser level of love. But the bottom line is, all midas come from Chabad. Both Ava and Yira come from his blindness, come from contemplation. The only question is, which way are you channeling that contemplation? Sometimes the same thing you're thinking of will lead you to an Ava. Tomorrow you're thinking the same thing, it'll lead you to Yira. Think about it in different terms. Imagine you have a father who you respect, an awesome father, and you think about your father's greatness. Is that going to lead you to a greater love of him or a greater respect for him? And respect really is a synonym for Yira. Yira is respect. It's whereas Ava is love.
Men hebben Ava, we have respect for somebody.
No. Ava is love. Love and respect are two different things. Love is my desire to come close to something, my desire to be near. Yira is, if you take the words fear, awe, reverence, respect, and you crunch them together, and if you're able to be one word, you can make out of that, that's what Yira is. Yira is the greatness of the thing. Ava is my desire for it. So again, going back to our mashal, so you think into your father's greatness. Is that going to lead you to Ava or a Yira? A Ava or a Kavod? Then with our parents also, right? There's Ish Imei V'aviv Tiro, there's a mitzvah of Moira, which also doesn't mean to fear our parents, doesn't mean it's just silly. It's reverence and respect, exactly. Right? Don't call your parent by their name, stand up when they come into the room, don't argue with them. All these things are a matter of respect. So when you think into a parent's greatness, is that going to lead you to love or to respect? Which one?
Respect.
It depends. One day it'll be love, one day it'll be respect, one day it'll be Ava, one day it'll be Yira. And the same thing over here. When we contemplate the greatness of Hashem, depending on the way we focus that meditation and that contemplation, it'll lead us either to Ava or to Yira. Further insight. The Kulon and in all of these midas, whether it's Ava, whether it's Yira, and all of them Tzarech liyes melubash behen b'chinas hadas. Das is very, very key.
What?
Das is very key, very, very, very important. You have to have das. What is das? Shuhu b'chinas hiskashrus hanefesh. Das is what you connect to, the soul connecting, hakshura utkua ba'asagazu, which is connected to and wedged into this understanding, shemasagas, eze inyan, this idea that you're understanding, Migdulas Hashem, this idea you're understanding about Hashem's greatness, shemimena nilda ba, that from the das is born eze mida mahamidas. The midas are born from the das. Ki behesach hadas kerega masagazu. Hesach hadas, which is very interesting, that even that word, hesach hadas, what is hesach? We don't say hesach habina or hesach hachochma. What does hesach mean? Hesach means the removal. Removal of das means the removal of the connection. The moment you stop connecting to the idea, mistaleka es gamkin hamida hanilda mimena mahagili, so that mida will also go away. It will not be any more revealed. Benefesh alahelam, it goes back to it becomes hidden. Lias babekoyach, and remains in a potential state. And not in actuality. That's why marital intimacy is known as das, because das is connection.
Connecting to what?
To the idea. So this is something, again, we've spoken about on various occasions. The idea of das is that I can know something, I can understand something. But the only way it's going to impact me in a real way emotionally is if I connect to it. Otherwise, I can know something, and if I don't connect it, it's not going to have an impact on me. It's not going to have an impact on my midas. It's not going to have an impact on my mashava d'bermaisa. It's not what you know. It's what you connect to.
In what ways you connect to it? But Paul Maisi, do Maisim Tovim Chesed.
Okay, so today in America we have a very polarized political scene, right? You have people who are big Trump supporters, and you have people who are amazing anti-Trump supporters. I mean, anti-Trump people. What separates the Trump supporters from the anti-Trumpers? Is there some sort of information?
Misunderstanding, misinformation.
Is there some sort of information that if the Trump supporters know, which the other ones don't know, which causes them to support Trump? Is there some sort of information that the anti-Trumpers have, which is why they don't support Trump, and if they were to tell it to the Trump supporters, they would stop supporting him? If so, I think we just need to have a meeting of the minds. Imagine that, let's say you support Trump, and you meet someone who doesn't support him, so you just have to inform him of the facts, right? He's probably unaware of the reasons why to support Trump. I mean, you support him because there's certain things that you know. There's certain understandings about him. If you just you relay the understandings, that person will obviously immediately become a Trump supporter, right? Or vice versa. Let's say you're anti-Trumper, and you meet a person who supports Trump. All it is a matter of telling that person that information. Yeah, everyone's nodding their heads. Obviously, what I'm saying is ridiculous. It's foolishness. If you don't believe me, try it. I don't know whether you support Trump or you don't support Trump, but whatever side you are.
I agree with what you're saying.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. Of course, that's not going to happen.
Oh, sometimes, yeah. Some people do.
No, not sometimes. Never. It's never going to happen. It's never going to happen.
Even you present.
Ruben, you support Trump or not?
Sure.
Sure. Okay, so try it. Find someone on the street. And give us a report how it went, who doesn't support Trump, and say to him, and give him over the information that you have, and see if that changes the situation. And by the way, that's the biggest mistake, that's the biggest foolishness in thinking. I mean, it's in all areas of life. I mean, today, obviously, the big debate today is about vaccines. And yet people are arguing with each other about it. And it's so foolish, these arguments. Why is it foolish? Because when you're arguing with someone, it's almost like you're making an assumption, there's information I have which you don't have. And that's not true. Everyone knows all the information. Everyone knows the advantages of vaccines. Everyone knows the disadvantages of vaccines. Okay, I know there's also some wild conspiracy theories. I'm not going there. And the same thing is when it comes to Trump. Everyone knows. Everyone knows Trump is a narcissist. Everyone knows that. Trump is immature and has terrible midas. We all know that. These are facts, okay. Then we also know that Trump has done a lot of wonderful things, Bechlal, and especially for Eretz Yisrael, okay? So what's the difference between the pro-Trump and the anti-Trump? Not the information. The difference is in das, which means which piece of information that I know do I connect to? What am I connecting to? So let's say I support Trump. That's hypothetical. I'm not giving over my political opinions over here if I have any. But let's say I support Trump. What does that mean? That means that I am choosing to connect to das, to focus on the positive areas. And I'm not connecting. I'm not having das. I'm not connecting to the negative things. The person across from me who is an anti-Trumper knows the exact same information that I know. The difference is they're das. And that's why we're saying that midas always follow das. We know many things, but what do I feel? How do I feel about something? That depends on what I connect to. I can know all about Gedulas Hashem, but if I don't have the das, if I don't connect it, it's not going to help me anything.
Why do I connect to one thing versus another thing?
We'll see soon. That's a good question. But that's why das is so important, because ultimately there's a lot of information swimming around in my head. Yeah. But none of that is me. Me is what my feelings are. What am I going to connect to? That's going to shape who I am, my feelings and my attitudes and my perspectives, and that's all based on das, which is why das is so critical in the process of translating information into midas.
And Iggeres is das?
What?
Yeah.
Iggeres?
Yeah. It's where it comes from. Das is what I'm connecting to, and everyone chooses what to connect to. V'zehu b'chinas das tachten. And now the Alter Rebbe is going to tell us everything that we spoke about das is das tachten. or Hadas HaTachten. And we're going to do this first outside, and then we'll do it inside. The Alter Rebbe is going to introduce us. There's another kind of Das which is called Das Elyon. You know, the pasuk says, Chana says, Keil De'ois Hashem. That Hashem has De'ois, which is a multiple of Das. And in Kabbalah is brought down that what does this mean? That there's Das Elyon and Das Tachten. There are many understandings of Das Elyon and Das Tachten. Usually it means one thing in Chassidus, a higher perception or lower perception of Hashem's relationship with the worlds. But here the Alter Rebbe is going to introduce us something which is not discussed in many places in Chassidus. There's Das Elyon and Das Tachten. But the Alter Rebbe B'Kitzur is going to give us something, a very important idea, which is also, by the way, going to explain, as you know, if you're ever wondering that you have Chassidim who are Chassidei Chabad, right? So you have Chachma Bina Das. But for those of you who are more Kabbalistically attuned, you might be aware of the fact that the other people who to them Das almost doesn't appear. Instead you have Keser, Chachma, Bina. And Keser, Chachma, Bina, from there you move on to Chesed, Gevura, Tiferes. Why is it that sometimes we have Chabad, and sometimes we have what's called Kachab? Kachab is Keser, Chachma, Bina. So all of this is going to become clear in our following conversation. The Das that we're talking about up until now, by the way, which is the Das, which is in 95% of the places in Chassidus when we talk about Das, is referring to Das Tachten. Das Tachten connects the Seichel to the Midas. That's what we spoke about up until now. Das Elyon connects Chochma to Bina. So Das Tachten connects the Seichel to the Midas. Das Elyon connects Chochma to Bina. Why do we need this? And by the way, if you know the chart, so you have Chochma, Bina, Das, right? Das is in the middle. That's Das Tachten. Das Elyon is on top. Chochma, Bina, and Das is in the middle, but it's on top. So when Das is on the bottom, it's connecting Chochma, Bina to the Midas below it. When Das is on top, it's connecting Chochma to Bina. Das, the idea of Das is connection, as mentioned. When is connection required? What is the idea of connection? Connection means I am connecting to something which by definition is outside of me. Because if it's part of me, I don't need to connect it. It's part of who I am. So connection means, unless I'm connecting two things that are outside of me, but that's not what we're talking about. Connecting myself to something which is outside of me. So in the Das, which we're talking about, Das Tachten, it's connecting me, my midas to my seichel. Why is that called connecting me to something outside of me? So to answer that question, I want to actually go off a little on the side and ask you another question.
Seichel is part of you.
Sorry? I hear you.
Yes,
We'll explain.
Oh,
We'll explain. We're sitting here for many shiurim, and we spoke about the Nefesh HaBahamis first, the structure of the Nefesh HaBahamis, and then we moved on to the structure of the Nefesh HaLakis. There's how do you say the word? Peculiarity. Something interesting, an oddity you might want to say, about the way the Alter Rebbe structures the Perek, which no one asked yet about, which is that in both when describing the Nefesh HaBahamis and when describing the Nefesh HaLakis, the Alter Rebbe starts off by talking about the Midas, and then he says, and the mucker and shaders of the Midas is the Seichel. Isn't that backwards? Why didn't the Alter Rebbe start
the other way around
with Chabad and then move on to the Midas, both by the Nefesh HaBahamis and by the Nefesh HaLakis? And the reason is, if I want to talk about you, I have to talk about your Midas, not about your Seichel, because your Seichel isn't you. Your Midas are you. And it's going to be a little tough to explain, but bear with me, I will try. If I know 2 + 2 = 4, I can give a shir and use a whiteboard and diagrams, and I can, even if no one here knows 2 + 2 = 4, I can give a shir and I can explain it to everyone. So a seichel that I have in my head, I can also give over to others. Let's say I like pickles and ice cream and chocolate and herring all together. mix it up in a bowl, and serve it. Anyone else like that? No. Okay, you don't like it yet, just like you didn't understand 2 plus 2 equals 4 till I explained it to you, right? You also don't yet like pickles and herring and chocolate and ice cream, but I will give you a share. And I will explain to you the like for pickles and herring and ice cream and chocolate, and everyone will walk out liking it. Shouldn't that work that way?
You should try it out and see if you like it.
Let me try it out, see if you like it. Why can't I, just like I can explain to you 2 plus 2 equals 4, why can't I explain to you my like for some weird food?
That's your like, not my like.
And 2 plus 2 equals 4 isn't mine?
It's everybody's.
Ooh.
It's everybody. 2 points.
So 2 plus 2 equals 4 is not me.
No, it's not you.
My seichel isn't me. Remember you asked before, you said, no, it's not me. What the seichel that I have is I'm understanding an idea which is outside of me. In other words, I'm tapping into an idea. 2 plus 2 equals 4, by the way, existed before anyone understood it. It's a truth. I tap into it. I can explain it to you, to you, to you. It's not me. It's something that I become aware of. It's not me.
But you know,
If no one likes pickles and ice cream and herring and chocolate, does that exist? Does that like even exist? No, it doesn't exist. Because a feeling is me. There can't be a feeling absent a person. An idea.
No.
There could be an idea without a person. And throughout all the ages, what are the big, the big wise people? They're busy discovering ideas and truths that always existed. And they're finding them out. When you say, if I was the first person who likes pickles and ice cream, etc., did I discover a truth that was always out there, just no one yet tapped into it? No. There is no like without a person. In Midah, the definition of Midah is I like. The definition of understanding is not I understand. The definition of Seichel is not I understand. So within me, there's 2 parts. There's me. What I like, what I don't like, what I respect, what I fear, all of this, that's me. And then there are things that I understand, but that's not me. Now, the truth is that the midas that I have are informed by my seichel. They are. The makar v'shorish of my midas are my seichel. And as mentioned, that's why a little kid, what do they like? Lollipops. You grow older, your likes and your dislikes become more sophisticated. Why? Because the seichel grows. So the seichel influences the midas, but ultimately, who are the midas? The midas are the person. And the seichel is what influences who the person is. Okay. So let's say, for example, someone asked me to describe you. So would I say, well, okay, I need to describe Harold, right?
Harold? Do I
So
look
bad
like
with that.
Harold?
What's the name? What's your name? I forgot.
Sheldon.
Sheldon, I'm sorry. Would I say, oh, you want me to describe Sheldon? Okay, let me tell you. Sheldon, okay, he's a yarmulke. And underneath the yarmulke, there's a head. Right? That's silly, right? I could say Sheldon wears a yarmulke. But that would be, I talk Sheldon, and Sheldon wears a yarmulke. I wouldn't start with talking about the yarmulke, because that's outside of him. You don't start with something. So when we want to describe the person, you don't start with seichel. You want to know who the person is the midas. Let's first talk about the actual person. That is the midas, and that's why both of them describing the nefesh elokis and the nefesh habahamis, the main thing is the midas. And by the way, that's also what the pasuk says, Da'as elokei avicha. And what's the purpose of Da'as elokei avicha of Deyu b'leiv of Shalom? Ultimately, the purpose of all seichel is the midas, because when you're serving Hashem b'leiv Shalom, that means you're serving the Eibishter. So seichel is outside of you, and midas is who you are. Das is what's connecting you to the seichel. That's what connection is. Das is that connecting point that connects you to something which is outside of you. There's an idea in your head that's not you. an understanding you have about the greatness of Hashem. That's not you. I want that to become me, to become my personality. That I should be, a fire of love for Hashem and have yirah for Hashem.
That's das.
The das is what connects me to the ideas in my head. That's das tachten. But then there's das alien. What is das alien? Because Chochmah and Bina is also a form of connecting you to what's not you. And how is that? Chochmah is something I see, something I become aware of. Bina is what I process. Bina is me. Bina is where I start processing. Chochmah is something which is outside of me, an awareness that I have. What connects those two? What causes me to connect to and internalize and start processing something that I become aware of? That's Das Elyon. Again, we need here a connection. By way of example, there was a very famous video, a viral video that went around on a topic called intentional blindness. Something called intentional blindness. To illustrate it, there's a video. I remember the first time I saw it many years ago. It's pretty funny. You can look it up online also. Basically, you have a video, and there's two teams. One team dressed in white, and one team dressed in black. And there's a caption that goes on the screen and says, "Okay, watch closely and see how many times they have a basketball. How many times the team that's in white passes the ball. Count the passes, and let's see if you can get it right." Okay, they start dribbling and passing, and the people in the black are trying to protect. And this goes on for like a minute, and then on the screen it says, "Okay, how many passes was it?" So let's say you say it's 17. And a moment later it says on the screen, "Yeah, it was 17, but did you notice the dancing beer?"
The dancing what?
The dancing beer. And you're like, "What?" "Yeah." Rewind the video. Rewind the video, and you see that between the people passing the ball, there's a guy dressed up in a beer costume, and he's coming and he's dancing all around the place, and you don't notice it. You're so busy paying attention to the balls, how many, because you want to get the number right. You don't notice the beer. Go look it up, gorilla test or ball, and you'll find it. It's a very famous video. And this is something which is true in life, which is that at all times in our life, we are automatically, otherwise we'd be completely overloaded by our senses. We are always filtering out what's important to us and what isn't important to us. We see a lot of things, but of the things that we see, how many of the things are we processing? A simple example is, you walk into someone's house, and you notice right away, there's a picture, and the picture's a little off kilter. So you go and you fix it. You wonder, why didn't the people in the house fix it? You know what the answer is?
You didn't notice it.
They didn't notice it. Why did you notice it?
It's not unimportant.
They didn't. They're walking the house every day, every night. They didn't notice it. Why? Because they walk to the house and they don't notice the picture. Because we choose what things that we're paying attention to. It's called intentional blindness, and that's why sometimes it's like, if you were to tell me there's something in my house, I'm like, really? I didn't even notice that. In my own house, things that I see, yes, and I see them every single day, and I don't notice them. I think about everyone's life. You know what I'm talking about. When you go to a restaurant with your wife and you sit down and you're listening to what she's saying, what you're doing by definition is you're shutting off your ears because there's so much going on around you, and you're focusing in on your wife. Chochmah are all the things that we are aware of in life and that we become aware of. Bina are those things that we choose to actually dwell upon and process. Meaning, the things that I want to connect to. So just like there needs to be a connection between Bina and Midas, Das serves that function. Why? Because Bina is not really me. My Seichel is not really me. Midas is me. I need to connect me to that which is outside of me, and that's the function of Das. In a similar way, we have another Das, which is Das Elyon, which is connecting me, but this time my Bina to my Chochmah, which is outside of me. That's Das Elyon. Why do I connect to something? I connect to something, and this is where Ratzon comes into play. Das and Ratzon are pretty much the same thing. Whenever I connect to something that's outside of me, it's because I have the desire to connect to that. So when I'm in Das Elyon, of all the things that I see and that I hear, those things that I'm choosing to focus on, to process, and to take seriously and to think about, it's because I have that ratzon. The same thing going back to the Trump-Biden thing, right? Why am I choosing to focus on Trump's on his positives or negatives, whichever way? That's a feature of ratzon. So therefore, if let's say I'm against Trump and you're for Trump, and I'm having this argument with you, and I'm saying, but he's all these chesronos. He's an immoral person, and you say, but he does all those good things. What happens is your ratzon is to connect to one aspect of seichel, which is that's why that takes your das in that direction. My ratzon is to connect to another area, which is what takes my das to another, which is what takes my das and my midas to another area. So das is connection, which is connected to ratzon, which is why, in the larger scheme of things, ratzon in general is associated with keser. Ratzon is associated with keser, which is higher than chachma. So but because keser and das are both about ratzon, so therefore when keser is counted, das isn't counted. In the words of Kabbalah, b'makim sha keser nimna eina das nimna, b'makim sha das nimna eina keser nimna, because they're very similar in their function, which is why we count only one or the other, either keser or das, because they're both about ratzon. In keser, it's more about pure ratzon. In das, it's about the ratzon to connect. But because they share this faculty of ratzon, that's why they're exclusive. We don't find them together in the same place. It's either Chabad or Kachab. And when we have Kachab, Das doesn't appear. And when we have Chabad, Keser doesn't appear. Kachab. Keser Chachma Bina. Yeah. Let's do this inside.
Why does somebody have this roots and the other guys this roots?
That's already a very deep thing. That's a very deep thing. Ratzon is not a koyach of the nefesh, it is the nefesh. So it's really mushish in the nefesh. Ratzon is not a koyach of the nefesh.
And it is.
Ratzon is the nefesh. It's what I want. Which is very different than all the other koiches, which are the nefesh has koiches. The nefesh doesn't have ratzon. Ratzon is the expression of the nefesh. So it runs very, very deep.
Is that from the midas, the roots and the line?
No, midas are controlled by that. By the ratzon, by the das. This is, by the way, this is a very deep idea, and as I mentioned, in Chassidus, it's not really talked about a lot. A few places in Chassidus, there's Das Alien and Das Tachten, but wherever in Chassidus it does talk about Das Alien and Das Tachten, its source is these few lines that we're learning over here in Tanya tonight. Let's do this inside. Let's start again from V'lechein Nikra HaZivug, which is around 9 lines from the bottom of the 2, 4, 6, 9, 9 lines from the bottom of the page. V'lechein Nikra HaZivug b'lashon das. That's why in the Torah, when it talks about marital relations, it's called das. V'bnei shu lashon hiskashrus, because das is connection. And the ultimate connection that there exists in the human realm is the connection between a man and a woman when they get married. And that's why it's called das, because das is all about connection. It's and once again, connecting to something outside of you, which is the same thing, which is what marriage is all about. You're connecting to something which is outside of you. And up until now, our conversation was about das tachten. Hamispashet b'midas. Das tachten is what extends and manifests in the midas. Umislabish bahem. It enters the midas lahachyesan ulekaiman. It's what gives them life and existence. In other words, the fact that there's midas is because I connected to the bina. Das means I connected to that which I understood, which is what gives birth to midas and allows them to exist. But v'yesh b'chines das ha'elyon, there's another level of das elyon. Shehu b'chines hiskashrus v'chibur. What is das elyon? It is the connection of makar haseichel, the source of seichel. What is the makar of seichel? Chachma. Hamasig imek hamusig. The source of the seichel, which understands, the source of the understanding of the depth of the idea. Shehu kinekuda ukebara kamavrik al sichle, which, as we know, chachma is compared to a dot, which is why also, as we discussed on different occasions, the yud ke vav ke represent the different spheres, and chachma is the yud, because what is a yud? Yud is essentially a dot. Ukebara kamavrik al sichle. Chachma is like a bolt of lightning that extends into your seichel, and the das elyon is what causes Das elyon is what causes that it should spread down below. V'yavei oimek hamusig, and this depth of this concept, which is in Chachma, lidei havana, should come down into understanding in Bina, b'harchavas abir, with a deep understanding, ba'irich v'reichiv, as mentioned earlier, with length and width, shehi b'chinas Bina. So what connects the makar hasechel, which is Chachma and Bina, hanikra Bina nikras rechoives hanar. We know Bina is called, which is, if Chachma is a dot, Bina is called in Kabbalah the wide stream. That little dot, it becomes a wide stream. The little dot of Chachma becomes the wide stream of Bina. As I'll explain in this place, and that is the function of Das Eliyah. So with this, we've concluded Siman Tezvav in Iggeres HaKodesh, which is, again, as we started off saying, a fundamental siman in terms of our understanding of the Midas. And although we're talking about the Nefesh Elokis, Nefesh Bahamis, but ultimately this is about giving us some sort of understanding about Hashem. Now, we realize that Hashem himself is not understandable. And Hashem, the reason why Hashem himself isn't understandable is not because we're not intelligent enough, but because essentially Hashem is not understandable. You know, a mashal that the Alter Rebbe gives, which we learned in Sharich Hamuna, Perik Tes, which I'm sure Reuven recalls.
And in Chazri.
He says, imagine if I were to walk into class one day, and before I sit down and say, Rabbi Yisai, the ideas that we are going to talk about today in class, very deep, very lofty, very abstract. In fact, the ideas are going to be so deep, you won't even be able to touch them with your finger. So the Rebbe says on this, Kol Hashemeya Yitzchak Lei. Whoever hears such a statement will start laughing. Thank you. I find from experience that when I say that, people don't laugh at me. They just look at me like I'm strange. But the idea remains the same. But the question is, why? Why is that such a laughable statement? If I say that the idea is so deep you can't touch it, is it true? Will you be able to touch it with your finger? So what's wrong with that statement? Why is it such a ridiculous statement? Because that statement contains an implication. The implication is that really sometimes what?
That it's a physical thing, and it's not an idea. It's
Right.
an idea. It's not a physical thing that you can touch.
Exactly. And the implication is ideas essentially could be touched. However, in this particular case, due to the particular profundity of this idea, you can't touch it, which is silly. Because ideas can't be touched, because the world of touch and the world of ideas don't intersect in any which way. Rabbi is also bringing out the point that sometimes even when you say something in a negative form, like you can't even say something about Hashem that I can't understand him. It's also a ridiculous statement. Why? Saying I can't understand Hashem is like saying I can't touch the Dvar Seichel. Implication being, I can't touch this, the class that I'm giving today, you can't touch because it's so, it's so deep and your finger is so weak. But imagine if the ideas I was giving over today were a little simpler, and maybe if your finger was a little stronger, maybe you had a turbo powered finger, maybe you could touch it. No, it's ridiculous. Saying I can't understand Hashem is like, I'm not smart enough to understand Hashem. No, it's not that you're not smart enough to understand Hashem. It's that Hashem isn't understandable. Because trying to understand Hashem is like trying to touch an idea. Hashem doesn't exist in the world of Seichel. Hashem created Seichel. Hashem created intellect. Once you understand that Hashem created logic, then trying to logically understand Hashem is illogical. Think about that for a second. If I understand that Hashem created logic, which means that He created it, He's above it, He's beyond it. That's right. So whenever someone comes and says, I don't understand Hashem, as if he's surprised, the surprising thing would be if you could understand Hashem. Actually, it makes no sense. It's not logical to assume that we can understand Hashem. Hashem created logic. So Hashem himself we can't understand. But Hashem wanted us to have some sort of understanding of it. He wants to have a relationship with us. He wants us to understand a little about it. So what does Hashem do? Hashem manifests himself through 10 spheres. Chachma, Bina, Das. He reveals himself to the world through those attributes. And then he takes it a step further. He gives us those very same attributes through which he manifests himself. And suddenly we can have a little of Hasaga in Hashem. Not in the essence of Hashem. The essence of Hashem which is beyond the spheres. You know, the Pasuk says, Olam Chesed Yibana. Olam Chesed Yibana, literally a simple level, it means that Hashem created the world with Chesed. But Chassidus says, Olam Chesed Yibana in a deeper sense means Olam. When Hashem wanted to have a world, Chesed Yibana, he had to build Chesed in order to create the world. The spheres are in order to create the world. Hashem didn't need the spheres to create the world. Could have created it poof, right? Abracadabra. But by using and expressing himself through the spheres, that allows us to have some sort of understanding of Hashem in the way he manages the world, and have some sort of relationship with Hashem. And that's really the nukuda of this entire siman, is looking at ourselves, trying to understand our koiches, our chachma, our bina, our das, our chesed, our gvura, etc., and thereby to have some sort of understanding of Hashem, as Hashem also invests himself in creation. And to conclude with a vart on the parsha, we have in this week's parsha, we know that Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu, to go to Pare, to go with Aaron. And Hashem says to Moshe that when Pari is going to ask you for a sign, so tell Aaron to throw down his staff, his stick, throw it on the ground. It'll become a snake, a serpent, and that's not what happens. And then Pari was not very impressed by this, and he asked his Chartumim, he asked his magicians to do the same. They did the same, but then the pasuk says, "Vayivla mata Aaron es matoisam," that the stick of Aaron swallows up all of their sticks. Now, and important to understand, it doesn't say, as Rashi points out, it doesn't say that Aaron's snake swallowed up their snakes, but Aaron's stick swallowed up their sticks. After Aaron's stick already reverted to being a stick, at that point it already... what does that mean to us? What is the message to us in that? So, the Rebbe talks about this in the Sikha, and he gives us one of the messages. Obviously, in Torah, everything in Torah has multiple messages, but one of the messages is as follows. The stick represents something, and here we're learning Siman Tezvav about the different midas. One of the midas of the Nefesh Halikis, a holy midah, is a stick, is gevura. As the Alter Rebbe says, what is the gevura? Lihi para min harishayim, right? We said sometimes you have to punish the Rishayim. Sometimes the words the Alter Rebbe talks about in Midas HaNetzach, the idea of the Melchamas of David HaMelech Alav Hashalom. Sometimes the Nefesh Halikis needs a stick. And there's nothing better to symbolize that stick, the Gevura, than the stick with which the Makkos were done. It was the stick which punished Mitzrayim, and ultimately was a way of being Megala Hashem in the world, because the whole purpose of the Makkos, yes, there was also punishment over there, but the larger purpose was V'yadu Mitzrayim Kani Hashem. Mitzrayim got to know that about Hashem, and the Yidden also got to know about Hashem through that. As the pasuk says, when Hashem tells Moshe, "Boyel Pare," right? Kani Ichbad. This next week's parsha. Kani Ichbad. He asleep. Why did I make Pare's heart hard? Laman Shisi Eisai Ela Bikir. So that I should do all these miracles. And then the pasuk continues. Well, the man Tesaper, Ba'azne Bincha Ve'Lincha. The reason why I'm doing it is that you should tell your children and your grandchildren, Eisachar Salalti B'Mitzrayim, that which I played around with Mitzrayim, and the miracles I did, V'yedatem Ki Ani Hashem, and through this you know that I am Hashem. So the purpose of the Makkos was ultimately to bring about a gili, a lukus, that Mitzrayim should understand that there's Hashem, and Lahavdil B'nai Yisrael also, because ultimately everything's for B'nai Yisrael, but it required a stick. And the same thing is in our lives also. Yes, as we mentioned, the Nefesh Elokis has a stick, which is Midas HaGvura, and sometimes it has to be used. When we use that stick, who uses that stick? Who is the one who's holding that stick? We find something very interesting. That Hashem tells Moshe, tell Aaron to do it. Aaron? Who's Aaron? Aaron is the epitome of chesed. In fact, in Kabbalah it says if Avram was chesed, Aaron was Rav chesed. It's very interesting. You'd think that you'd get someone who's a Isha Gvura. No, it's a Isha chesed who does it. You know, in the Torah it talks about, the halacha talks about, sometimes we know a Yid does an Avera and he needs to get Malkus. Torah's chesed says that a Yid has to get Malkus. Who gives Malkus? Who's the one who gives the Malkus? If you look in halacha, you look in the Rambam says, based on the Gemara, that the person who gives the Malkus has to be someone who's Yaser b'chochma v'choser b'koyach. Yeah, don't look for the don't look for the strongest person. Look for a person who is more wise than he is strong. This state, the one who has to give the clap, the one who has to give the patch, the one who has to use the stick has to be filled with love. If chas v'shalom, when you're using that stick, it's coming from a place of hatred, a place of anger, that's possible. And by the way, we find this also later on. When it comes to the mitzvah, the worst punishment that we can give on a person is solitary confinement. And who does? That's for a mitzvah. Someone who spoke lashon hara and caused tremendous damage to society. So what is their punishment, their rectification? They have to be alone. Who is the one who sends them out of who's the one who sends them into solitary? A kohen. A kohen isha chesed. The kohen who says, Levarech es Ama Yisrael bi'ahava. That's the one who says, because yes, sometimes we need to use a stick, but we always have to make sure that it comes from a place of love. And another, the Maharsha, Masechta Shabbos, when he talks about this miracle with the stick eating up the other sticks, the Maharsha says that one of the miracles was that even though that the stick of Aaron ate up all the sticks, it didn't become any thicker. It remained the same size. And metaphorically, that means sometimes we eat up someone else. You know, we swallow them up, and we feel we're fatter. We feel bigger because of it. That can't be the case. Sometimes, you have to use the stick. You can never feel bigger or better. It can never feel good to you. And that's, if you can also, just for a moment, address Minyani Diyema, some of the parsha that's going on, unless you're living under a rock, you know what's going on there. It's Yisrael, the big story of this week. And there's a debate, a raging debate amongst people. What's the proper derech to go about these things? You know, on the one hand, some people are busy screaming that right, that you can't publicize a person's averos, and when you do that, then you're causing incredible harm. And the other side, there are people who are saying, what do you mean? This person is a reidif and needs to be punished. And what we're doing is we're creating over here a false binary. Meaning, it's an either or. Either we're quiet and we don't do anything, right? And we don't publicize and we make like it didn't happen. That's one option. The other option is to come out and kicking and screaming and condemning. And the question is, which path do we take? And the answer is neither. The answer is that absolutely, as a society, there's an obligation when someone is dangerous and someone's doing things which can be a sakana for a society. That person has to be called out, and people have to know about it. But where does the problem begin? Where does the shvichas dam begin? The shvichas dam begins when it's not Aaron who's holding the stick. When the stick is being used with a ritzicha, with a hatred, with an anger, with a self-righteousness, with a smugness. When people are getting fat off the stick, getting fat off of eating someone else up. Yes, there's a time when there has to be gvura. There's a time when we have to use a stick, and when sometimes a person sometimes we need to stand up in public and proclaim certain things. But at the same time, the most important thing to remember is where it's coming from, and that makes all the difference in the world. It makes all the difference in the world. When something comes from a place of love and care, then it doesn't do damage. Then it does only good, and it brings people closer. And it fixes what's wrong, and that is the path. It's not, always we're looking for a balance. It's not about staying silent on the one hand, or going to, on a crusade all up on the other. It's about finding that middle, doing what has to be done, but making sure that whatever is done from a place of love. Shabbos, everyone.